the guy that is the sort of the lead developer of the project, Galero. It goes to his head every time anybody criticizes it. I'm like, get it out of your head. There's always gonna be detractors. Just bear in mind, like any press is good press. If people aren't arguing about it, at least they're talking about it. So if that's
Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we unpack the messy, beautiful intersection of creativity and business with the artists, marketers, and founders shaping our culture. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made, and I'm the host of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Corbin Reeves, founder of Azure Ravens Entertainment, Cameron Dayton, narrative director behind Overwatch, Call of Duty, and NBA 2K, and Cheryl Platts, author of the Game Development Strategy Guide. I'm forever grateful for the supporters of this podcast, and we are always open to more sponsors that align with our brand. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by the creatives at Epic Made. Epic Made is a strategic creative studio helping brands turn big ideas into unforgettable animated content, campaign visuals, and story-driven creative that actually connects and turns viewers into fandom. We work with the biggest brands in gaming, entertainment, and tech, and pop culture to make their ideas feel bigger, clearer, and harder to ignore. So if your brand has a campaign, launch, pitch, or story that needs to stand out, visit epicmade.net and let's make something epic together. All right, got that out of the way. So with us today, we have Khedron DeLeon, engineer turned writer and narrative designer behind the Vampire Masquerade Reawakened project. Welcome to the show, Khedron. Really excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Feel free to give me a rating of 1 to 10 on that name pronunciation. I definitely butcher a lot
That
of
was
names
good.
on that.
I think you did a good job.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Well, Khedron is a storyteller at heart who has explored narrative across role-playing games, fiction writing, video game narratives, and creative frameworks that empower others to tell their own stories. Whether running tabletop campaigns or designing narrative systems, he revels in the process, from the broad strokes of world building to the fine details of mechanics, pacing, and dramatic structure. He also brings a unique perspective shaped by engineering, blending systems design and storytelling in ways that challenge creative limits and unlock new possibilities. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, Kedron. You're just out here having fun. Does this even work?
They say if you love what you do, you never work during your life, right?
There are varying degrees of truth to that for sure. But I feel like no matter what it is you're doing that you love, at some point there is a grind in the middle. That's like, I kind of.
It is a labor of love. It's an all volunteer project, so I'm not making any money off of it. Just to be clear, but
That's okay.
we have thousands of supporters at this point, so happy
Well,
to be
look,
doing it.
you're building a groundswell, building a community around a game, and you're leveraging, your passion for the space and storytelling and systems and all the things that have layered into your life that you've learned over the years, and that's really exciting. So, I'd love for the audience to get a chance to know you a little bit better before we get into the meat of the subject today. So, how long have you been in the industry, and what project are you most proud of so far?
Well, gaming industry. If we're talking about game design, not necessarily video games, or probably 20 years. I've built live action role playing game rules, tabletop game rules, card game rules. Um, None of that stuff compares to what I'm doing now, which is building a video game, which I've been doing for now almost 5 years. We're about to have a release, hopefully by the end of this year. Um, and a lot of that is just driven by definitely by my love for storytelling, but also like I like to order information. Uh, as an engineer, I was a database and network, like software engineer, and so you can't really. There's not a lot of forgiveness in that world. You miss a comma or a semicolon, and the whole thing breaks. And so you got to pretty much be perfect. So there's a little more
Yep.
forgiveness in the narrative and creative world. But as far as systems go, they say if you want to know the truth of something, put it out on the internet wrongly and just wait for people to correct you. And the video game industry is very much like that. Like if you don't have
Oh yeah.
your stats right, or your, this effect does exactly what it says it does, then people will be all over you in a minute. So
Yeah, having a fandom is a double-edged sword, right? They really care about the game and they get into the weeds and every little nuance and they'll pick everything apart. And they'll let you know where you dropped the ball. And they'll also celebrate you more than anybody else when you do it right. So it's an interesting community. So I
yeah,
love that, man.
the guy that is the sort of the lead developer of the project, Galero, he's considerably younger than I am, but it goes to his head every time anybody criticizes it. I have to keep reminding him, all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, and never all the people all the time. And he's just, I'm like, get it out of your head. There's always going to be detractors. Just bear in mind, like any press is good press. If people aren't arguing about it, at least they're talking about it. So if that's
Yeah, something that helped me out early on when I started building my brand and people, started showing up and having opinions about my art or my creativity and some framework that I got that I thought was great. One is on the marketing side. When you create something, it should be so unique and so compelling that it's fracturing in the market, right? That people will either really love this because it speaks to them, or they really hate it because it just isn't their vibe. And you want that. You want just a clear divide, like now this is your audience and this is not, and that's really helpful, right? And it's like I've had it. My wife equates, because we all have these issues and concerns. Like I'm a people pleaser and I want everyone to love me, right? And she's like, you know what, babe? She's like, you're mint chocolate chip ice cream. And some people love mint chocolate chip ice cream. And some people absolutely detest mint chocolate chip ice cream. And that's okay. Like, be the best mint chocolate chip ice cream you can be and don't
yeah,
fucking worry about it. Like, like
yeah.
I'm
No,
like,
I believe in that, and I mean it's it's a weird challenge just for the audience. Like we're building this in Skyrim, which is it's a blessing
building it
because
in
it
the
has so many.
Skyrim game builder. Is that what you're
Yeah, I
saying?
think
Yeah.
it's creation kit is what it's called, and it has a ton of assets, which is one of the reasons that we picked it. Lots of people like Unreal or Unity, and we have lots of people come on and say, is this a Raymond B that we just put a fact up there because we got tired of answering it, but the at the end of the day, it's just got like a ton of scripting behind it, and the guy that I'm working with, the developer, he has a knee jerk no to anything I ask him. So I'll see a rule and be like, "This needs to be in the rules. This mechanic needs to exist," and he'll say no. And then like I'll say but, and I'll put the argument out there, and he'll get mad at me and sort of rage quit the chat or whatever. And then a couple days later, he's like, "I think I figured out a way to do it." And so that has been the mo like from the beginning, pretty much.
I
And
love it.
we've been able to do like so much with Skyrim, and up like that Skyrim never did before. That Arcane University, which is the people that support Sky Oblivion and Skywind projects, which are sort of remasters of the various Skyrim worlds, and some other pretty large Skyrim projects, reached out to us because of the stuff that we've been able to do, because they didn't know how to do it and they wanted to be able to do it. And so it's kind of like being a foreign country that like just formed and waiting for a treaty from a legitimate country, to like legitimize your existence. So we had that, and that was kind of exciting. That was another 12,000 developers that we can tout, for extra jobs. Um, so that was super useful. But anyway, yeah. So that's the sort of the bigger Skyrim modding community, um, and that's now kind of where we sit.
And you guys picked the Skyrim, infrastructure. I don't know what the right word is there, to build on top of, because you think that like it just lended better to the visuals and the setting, and like it was already sort of like closer to what you were trying to accomplish, rather than like trying to build something from scratch in Unity or Unreal.
So I had very little to do with that decision, to be honest.
Okay.
So like I joined this as a voice actor. Galera was on Facebook and said, "What anybody?" He said, "I've been looking at the mechanics in Skyrim, looking at the mechanics on the White Wolf universe, and I think it would make a good medium to build all these mechanics that are in the White Wolf universe because it already has a lot of them because it's originally a fantasy game."
Right.
Um, And it has vampires and just a lot of magic and effects and whatever. You do a lot of stuff with it. But and I had
Yep.
just started as a voice actor, and then the voice lead quit. So I was like, well, I can herd people, so I can do that. And I got a good ear, and I love great caricature, when somebody's like delivering lines. Like, so it's really fun to listen to. But then I realized, like, I'm actually a writer by trade. So like there was a big gap in the writing area, and nobody had transcribed the scripts. And I was like, hey, I can do that too. And then I realized nobody else was stepping up that had the lore from the universe. And I was like, well, I can do the lore too. And after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm just a creative director, like, because I'm basically driving the bus at this point, and all the developers are doing what I'm asking. So, but he chose that medium, and before any of it was months before any of that happened, what I just described, and so it was already well in place by the time I was down in the guts of it. And I'm
Gotcha.
actually now starting to script and do other things within it. I've learned essentially a trade that nobody's ever going to hire me for. The Skyrim creation kit. There's not a lot of call for. We need Skyrim developers, out there. It's all Unity and Unreal, but
For this
uh,
game that's
oh
16 years old, we need someone to come. Yeah, no, I hear that.
yeah, no, like, but the flip side of that, like I said, is that there's just a ton of material out there as far as assets go. So like we've been able to reconstruct essentially the maps that were like very similar to the original Activision maps. I'm not allowed to say that name apparently, but like we got turned down by Activision, so we had to invent a bunch of material. Um, and because we're using a different engine entirely, like they can't zing us on assets. So, but we have built New York City and London and inside of a cargo ship, all looking very modern using Skyrim assets. And we have a actually a gun guy who's building a ridiculously realistic gun action for all the guns that we have. And so, like a lot of Skyrim mods that use guns, even Fallout for a time had the crossbow animation where you were using a gun. Yeah. And so it just didn't really track with what was happening in your hands, right? And you're shooting a gun, it shows a gun. But
This matters that
your
the
hands
things
are
die on the other side. It's okay.
yeah, yeah. So right, that was the important part, sure. But he's got shells popping out and just breaking the barrel for shotguns and just all kinds of crazy animations. And it's a little worrisome because he's a perfectionist, and I'm worried he's not gonna be done with his mod by the time we're getting ours. So we have to fall back on
Yeah.
on that.
So
With
this game, Vampire, the Masquerade Reawakened, was originally a title years ago that you guys are remastering or reinterpreting. Correct? Or how does that?
yeah, the original game was Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, which was released in 2000. It was a joint effort between White Wolf and Activision and Nihilistic, I think, which doesn't exist anymore. And was a fourth one, I can never remember. But anyway, Nihilistic and the other one don't exist anymore. But the rights are split between Paradox, who now owns all of the World of Darkness intellectual property. You're like a Swedish game company, kind of one of the bigger Swedish game developers or European game developers, and
Okay.
Activision. And there are a number of characters and events in the stories that are still considered canon within the White Wolf universe. And then there's a bunch of stuff that Activision just threw in there that had no business being there. And we had to consult, basically just to cover our own asses, be like, hey, can we use this stuff? And Paradox has a blanket clause, and Bethesda, which is Skyrim's, there's like have a blanket clause for making mods, right? And they're like, go ahead and make mods as long as everybody that's involved is okay with intellectual property.
Yep.
So Paradox was fine with it. They actually have written off all the content we're using when they created version 5. They actively wrote an in-game explanation for why all the stuff in the old version just didn't happen, um, which is a little bizarre and infuriating to quite a few, myself included. But it turned out that is the sort of loophole that allows us to do what we're doing, because we can now use all of old World of Darkness canon and not get in trouble for it because they don't care about it anymore. They're not marketing it anymore. They like still have some of the characters in the new World of Darkness because they're vampires that have been alive for 1,000 years or whatever. Like that had
Yeah.
to kind of exist before that. But
That's
then
cool.
Activision said no. And so because of that, we had to go through and piece by piece figure out every character that still existed, was mentioned in a book in the World of Darkness that is in publication, versus all the characters that Activision just invented, which we then had to rename and rewrite all of their scripts while maintaining the canonized scripts and still have all the meanings be the same at the end of the scene. So we have this person's lines are staying the same, but the person I'm talking to, all their lines are now different, even though the conversation has to end the same way. So
Yeah.
that was, yeah, and that's ongoing as we move forward in the script. We have to
Yeah. We got to
decide
navigate
on,
making it your own, right? And that's all right. So
yeah.
that's cool.
So
So this is a volunteer driven project, right? So how does volunteer development change creative freedom and overall quality compared to what, a paid project?
yeah, I was having that debate with a friend of mine a couple nights ago. Actually, there's a developer for Equifax, but he that it's interesting because I see, we saw Bloodlines 2 come out, which is a Paradox game in the White Wolf universe. And they had given it to the Chinese room to develop, and they changed a lot of things. Both, V5 is a vastly different departure from the old World of Darkness, and um, so there were some expectations, I guess, around the version 5 rules that were supposed to show up in the video game, and they took it even further. They just did weird things with it. The game itself, I think, had to be written down 37 million euros after it failed. They got about, I think, it's 60 rating across the board. Where most games are getting 80 or 90, like successful games.
Oof.
Um, so it did not do well. Anyway, so that was a paid effort. They also went through like 3 different development jumps, so there were some struggles there. And that's, but I don't know if that's really typical of a scenario. I think a lot of the corporations, you're allowed to basically tell your developers, like, get this done by a certain time, and that's when we need it, and they'll work every time and do whatever, if they're on salary, just get it done. And the volunteer effort, uh, it has to be a little more relaxed because we're not paying them,
Right.
and except for their own enjoyment, and the people that are helping us are genuinely enthusiastic. So we know, or most of the time we know that they're going to be on board. They want it to be done because they're excited about the game versus just trying to draw a paycheck. And I'm not saying people that video game development aren't excited about the games they're building. I'm sure they are, but there's a little added pressure and a little bit more onus involved with it. And the flip side of that is, of course, if like their child gets sick, you got to be like, look, just go take care of that. Like they're like, I'm gonna get you these voice lines, and like, no, dude, like go take care of your child. You know, and I'm sure most corporations, with a modern outlook are a lot more tolerant than that than the sort of old school traditional, thou shalt stay at work and
Yeah.
slave away for
You
us
have
model.
3 sick days, and I don't care what happens for the rest of the world.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, like yeah,
You didn't let the
exactly.
viruses know that you and your family only have 3 days this year. They
Yeah,
didn't get a pass with corporate. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
terrible.
and so and yeah, just there's a bounty of things that can go wrong, obviously, and so it's a constant shift of like who's available and who's not, and for the most part, people are, they try to make themselves available. Life happens, people move, or we had one guy who has or the lead voice actor has chickens apparently, and like 5 or a dog or something got in the chicken yard, and he went running around yelling at it, and he scarred his vocal cords. And we had already done a bunch of the work, and so there was like 2 months where he just couldn't talk, and
Oh
then when we
no.
finally, yeah, and then we're just like, oh, like, and so we finally got his voice back, and we basically I had to sit with him for most of the day, like coach him back into sounding like what he sounded like before. And it's still not 100%, but once you cut away from the scene and have other people talking, like the next time he shows up, as long as it's pretty close, like it's, you know,
It'll work.
running up,
As long as
like running
if
down
the
a couple.
story's good and it makes sense and the visuals are cohesive, people won't even notice. So,
That's you think that people. That's what I was telling you about people who've been like critical of stuff. It's been about the voice actors. They're like, that sounds French. I'm like, that's supposed to be is French. The character is supposed to be French. And the original
yeah.
character was this is something else we did. The one of the things I learned about video game production, and this is also true for films, and I'm assuming for any kind of audio, podcast or fiction tape, or whatever you're going to call it,
Yep.
where you have to determine, like, books on tape doesn't make sense because you can't have captions. Like, if you're watching a movie, you're watching a video game, someone's speaking a foreign language, you can choose, like, I'm going to have this overdub, with language, or you can just have it spoken, if you've got enough voice actors to do it in another language, you can just have them overdub it. We didn't have that, but the original game had a bunch of California people doing archaic, like Shakespearean style, thee thou kind of thou shalt and thou hast and all that kind of stuff, speech, and it just sounded so campy to me. And I realized we had this giant international community like coming onto our server, and thought, why don't we take the French guy and give him a French accent while he's doing this, and take the German guy and give him a German accent while he's doing, because you either have to have him speaking German and speaking French, and then have translations on the screen, which is a huge
Yeah,
pain.
yeah,
And
that's
then
just annoying. Yeah.
nobody, yeah, and then or you can do it in plain old English and just have everybody have no accent, which is kind of what they did with the first game. But I was like, it'll add a little bit of authenticity and kind of
Yeah.
define the characters a little better, because they're
A
gonna
little
all
more
have different
immersion, a little
accents.
more culture. I love that. And you said something about this, that I think is really important. So every time I talk to somebody about, what makes creative successful, right? This whole podcast is framed around the intersection of creativity and business. And the things that really resonate are because the people behind it were very passionate. And whether they're getting a steady paycheck and this is their 9 to 5, or they've assembled a collective through something like what you're working on. And I think in your case the passion is even more important, right? Because there isn't, like, you might never make any money on this, and obviously everybody wants to make money, and that's all part of the plan. But at the end of the day, like, I'm sure everyone's aware, like, hey, this might just end up being a passion project, and people are doing this because they want to do it, and they're having to make that time. But, like, if you're not fully on board with this, like on a passionate level, like, you absolutely want to see this game come back to market, like, I assume that falls apart and creates delays. And have you had any instances where people were like, not excited enough about the idea and they sort of just faded away because it just wasn't a priority, that sort of stuff?
We get a lot of we get a lot of people that are like, well, fan for social media and be like, we need a marketing person, just as an example. And this has been a constant struggle. And we get
Yep.
people that come in and say, yes, like, we're going to market for you. I know I do marketing, like, I love it. I do all that stuff. I love the idea of the project. Like, okay. And they're like, can I be your marketing lead? And we're like, not yet. Because what happens is they come in and for like a month or two, they're burning hot and then they flare out, and then
Yep.
then they ghost us. And it's like, well, next, and so that seems to be a trend with a lot of people, not specifically with marketing, but a lot of people who come on and really want the project, but then they realize it's actually going to take some dedication, and a little bit of perseverance, and they slow down, and so we, you know, tried to. It's another thing we have to kind of encourage everyone is like, you can't get excited about these folks until we know, until we see, like, after a couple months, are they still with us? Are they still doing the work? Do they still really want to make it happen? And if they do, they'll stay, and they'll continue to engage us, or they'll talk to us on their own. Like, we've acquired like a really good sound engineers, many musicians actually that are want to create original work for the project. um, a lot of asset creators that, like, we've got a couple of really skilled facial people, so we don't have default like Skyrim faces on our characters anymore. And there's apparently a lot of tricks you can do to make them look much prettier than the Skyrim sort of pasty faced like. And so there's that, and just the voice acting talent blows me away a lot of times. And some of the people, they just because it is ultimately a horror game. So there's bad things happening to people if they're not happy about it often. And so the voice actors have to reflect all that. And yeah, anyway, so that is definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Hey, nothing worth doing is easy to do, right? So you've always got to navigate different things, and in this case, you're building something in an existing RPG system that has limits that you didn't impose, right? It's not like you guys got to build all this from scratch. Not to mention, you're also like adopting a story and things that have already have a lot of rules and pieces to it that are limiting to, I guess, your creativity. So how do you keep that creative spark alive and that passion for creating something new within all these confines of an existing system and existing stories and existing universe?
Wonder, it's institution, which was like mid early '90s, and I have all these books. I also run a tabletop game on the side versus my friends, and that's often so yeah, that kind of feeds my ideas sometimes. But I really like listening to people's voices, like the voice acting. They give us like 6 or 8 takes of a single line, and we have to break the line up because in Skyrim there's only a limited amount of space to show what they're saying. So we have a 250 character limit. So all these lines are these short snippets, and so they'll do each one like a bunch of times, and then I get to listen to them and also listen to them mess up and like swear at themselves and say whatever, and the cat comes in or what. Yeah, this always is just like fun listening to that. And that's always entertaining. But I really do have a passion for building rules, like game rules, and making interactive systems. And so for me, it's like just the other day we're going. Skyrim has perks, which are different skills, I guess, that you can buy, and that's for doing a lot of the cult disciplines in the game, which are vampiric switching powers, basically, that they get through their vampiric blood. And so we've got that all tooled up, look nice, and has cool sound effects and everything. But the text for it, 90% of the people in this project are not native English speakers, but we're doing it in English. And so I have a lot of work with as far as the editing goes, and
Mm,
making sure that things are correct. Because English is wrought with homophones too, and so it's like they're always spelling stuff wrong and just like punctuating or leaving out articles because that's the structure of their language, and so they don't know. And like, uh, yeah, and so that's one of the things I've had to do is
yeah.
just make sure that on screen it looks professional. And I keep getting there's a lot of people that say like, don't worry so much about the documentation. Don't worry about it goes back to like, the internet's going to zing us for every little wrong thing that we have. And the people that are really serious about judging us are going to see these mistakes and they're going to say these people don't take themselves seriously. And I've learned that, I worked in cybersecurity, so that, like, as I said, it's one of the most unforgiving groups of people you can ever work with. And if you make one mistake, they will totally not take you seriously anymore.
Yeah.
So that drives me a lot. I can't speak to everyone else. I know that Galero was the one he is hell that he's going to bring it to fruition. I don't think he sleeps but about 3 hours a day, which is amazing. And some people have that in them, and that's how they sleep. But he is on it all the time. I think we have a number of moderators on our server who are basically people that have been with us from the beginning, and whether or not they're actually volunteers, they've continued to express enthusiasm about it. And whenever we have when we're bandying about ideas or brainstorming how to make a mechanic work or how to, take this particular aspect of the game and bring it into Skyrim's limitations, they'll chime in, whether or not they're actively developing or, have anything to do with me. It's like, this sounds fun, and that's another rule is, if we can stick it to canon, make it stick to canon, then we'll do that. If we can't, then the next rule is make it fun, and
Yeah.
so, because ultimately players want to see cool stuff and be able to do cool stuff, and they want a good story behind it and, at least, believable dialogue, going on. And I personally, well, I'm getting off topic, but
Sorry.
as far as people's passion and enthusiasm goes, a lot of them are people who have either played Skyrim and love Skyrim, or they've played game for love that. Bloodlines, the first Bloodlines game, which was sort of the crowning jewel of the White Wolf video game set, which Bloodlines 2 just came out last year. The first one was in 2004, so it's a 23-year gap or 21-year gap between games, which is a little ridiculous, but it is hailed as like one of the best vampire simulations ever by many people. Um, not just the White Wolf fans, but just in general, video game fans who've never played the tabletop game love that game. And so we have a lot of people that are enthusiastic for one of those reasons or more than one of those reasons. And then there's just general people that like the sound engineer guy. He doesn't know anything about White Wolf, but he knows a ton about. He can look at the little color graphs and Audacity to tell you like this is some static in the background. I'm like, well, how do we cut that out? Like, I don't even know, man. Like, he is. I do not grok his science. Like,
That's cool though.
oh,
Yeah, and again, the passion just comes through. And some people are passionate about different parts of it, right? Like they just love the idea of making high quality audio, and they're not maybe not super specifically passionate about that particular narrative and that universe that you're building within. But there's all sorts of ways to get excited about things. It's not just one way, right? Yeah, I was interested in asking, storytelling shows up in so many forms, and you've worked across so many different mediums, written, visual, improvised, scripted, all that sort of stuff. Like, what are there any tools that you think most designers overlook, or any things that they should be thinking about as they're making those things from your experience?
funny you asked that because I've been trying to sort of pin down the best way to do this, and the industry, there's more than one, but Miro seems to be the sort of go-to for narrative design, which is basically it's just a giant flowchart, essentially, with boxes that have the pieces of dialogue in them and then choices that come off of those, based on what the player says or can make, to change the direction of the story. And that is something I'm learning now. But I've seen some pretty impressive, dialogue sets. If you blow it out to the whole size and you print it out on the wall, and it's 5 feet wide with little boxes like this big, all the way across it, chained together with with lines connecting, this giant web of lines connecting. So that's kind of where we're headed.
What is that called?
Miro, Miro, and
Oh,
it's a software product, and there are different pay schedules for depending on what you need. Um, and like we
cool.
have actually I picked that up from the people from Arcane University. There's a lady Morgoth who comes, and she's kind of our secondary developer, like our second in command developer. She and I are often at odds because I'm well, like I said, I'm getting off topic, but
All right.
that numbering your scripts is something else. Like every line gets or like a long string attached to it, but is VTMR, which is in front of everything we do. So I'm part of the Masquerade Reawakened, so VTMR, the max numbers A1, S3, the speaker, the character's name, and then some number at the end. That makes a unique string that both orders it as far as that character's lines go, but also orders it in the entire act. Um, and that turns out to be that's something I did on my own, and it turns out to be a common practice. You're doing this anyway, so I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing because it needs to be done. It turns out to be what needed to be done anyway, and what the professional industry already does. The more corporate sort of established methods are things that present themselves. And yeah, anyway, so that's very useful. Knowing how long each line is, a bunch of seconds, because as far as seconds go, because there's a little engine in Skyrim that takes your speech and reads it, and then makes the lips of the person move so that they look like they're saying what you've written. And
Right.
it's conveniently called a lip file because it's moving your lips. But you have to know how long the thing is, so you have to time it, which is handy that Windows or operating systems in general will tell you the length of the sound file as part of the file information in a window. You can pull that up on your view, So that's useful, and that gets stuck into every script after every line. It's like, this is how long this is, so that the developers, when they plug it in, can put it in the lip file and make it look like they're actually saying what they're saying and sync with the words. Um, so that little piece of magic was bewildering to me. Yeah, it's wonderful in a lot of ways. Um,
I love it. It's always the little things, and the more you work through something, you don't even know what you don't know when you start a big project like this. And as you're
that
kind
was
of
that
hashing
is
through the
the
things, like,
damn
oh, there's
truth.
this. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm gonna put you on the spot because you told me you're a voiceover actor, and totally tell me no if you want. But I would love for you to do just explain the premise of this game in whatever voiceover, cool voice acting voice you want. And again, no pressure if you don't want to do that. But I just thought
Oh my
it'd be
god.
unique.
Like if I had something written up, it'd be much easier.
Okay, no worries.
I mean, as far as caricatures go, you can kind of. I My original audition for this was the speech from V for Vendetta that has all the words with alliteration of V words right in
Yeah,
it. And when I did it in this southern accent like this the whole way through, and like yeah, I'm not really prepared for that, to be honest.
dude, that's totally
And it
fine.
also takes a minute. It's something I find like it takes a minute to get into character.
Mm,
I mean, that's true for a lot of just any kind of acting. I think
of
like
course.
visual acting or any other stage acting, whatever. And just but to, I'll just say, like, a lot of the when we get in a set of lines, and the A line is done 6 or 8 times, the best ones are often the ones at the end because they're sinking into their character, like, as they get into it, and then, once they're there, lines that come after that, they're kind of already gotten into it, but right at the beginning, it takes them a few tries before they finally get into the role, whatever, like, however you
Yeah,
wanna
yeah,
say
yeah.
it, and, so this game is about, a Knight of St. John. Originally, it was a Livonian sword brother, but they didn't actually exist at the time this takes place. So there's a lot of canonical, like real world historical, what they call argot, which is stuff that's out of time. When like having a
They're
machine gun.
referencing things that didn't exist. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, having a machine gun in the Middle Ages is art. It's called argot. That's an argot thing. So we don't want argot. So the Livonian sword brothers didn't happen until 50 years later or something. So this guy's a Knight of St. John. And he is wounded in battle fighting a bunch of pagan warriors or whatever in near Prague. And he ends up in a convent being nursed, get back to health, and falls in love with the nun that's helping him. She also with him. And it turned out Prague is at the time was a very new municipality, and it was because they discovered silver in the hills. And this is all real history. And that brought a lot of trade up the Vltava River, and that's what basically allowed them to incorporate, according to because you had to go and petition the church, the Roman Catholic Church, to become a city, right? Because then you got a noble to rule over you, which also appointed by the church, ordained by God, all that stuff. So there's a lot of religious overtones to the whole thing, right? Because that's where the original title "Redemption" comes from, is because he, as a sworn knight of Christ, gets turned into a vampire. And then separated from his love, for 800 years, whatever. Uh, so that you go out and you kill everything in the silver mines because they've been taken over by monsters. And the city's economy is struggling, the town is struggling, and there's monsters running through the streets at night, and it's all coming out of these silver mines. And so you swear you're going to protect your nun girlfriend, and you go visit the blacksmith, and he tells you to go visit the witch. So you go visit the witch, and you get some, you pick up potions and stuff that can help you, and then you go down in the mines, and it's a dungeon crawl. When you fight a big boss at the end, it's
Love
all
it.
just one clicking, and you come back, and you're the hero. And then because of that, there's many, many other vampire clans. They call them clans, which are essentially families of vampires that have different characteristics. Um, and all the ones in town start eyeballing you as like that guy would make a good vampire. And so you get chosen by the Bruja, as they're called, which are old Greek sort of warrior philosophers. And they're also quick to anger. But they're known for fighting. It kind of fits. as the different clans in the White Wolf universe go, they are some of the more approachable ones for a new player. Like they're not all twisted up or worshiping snakes or whatever. There's all kinds of I think other ones that are a little less. Once you get into the lore, like you might want to start playing that stuff, but there's a few of them that are more human trending, I guess. So it's easier for newer players to sort of fall into those roles, and the Brute are one of those. And so you get embraced, as the term is, and then you get mentored by another group, and you acquire what's called a coterie, which is essentially your gaming party. Um, and go forward for Prague, then to Vienna, and then you go attack the big boss, the entire game's big boss in Prague or in Vienna. You come back to Prague, the cavern collapses on you. You wake up 800 years later in London. Um, and then you go through modern nights to find out that guy has moved to New York City, and so you end up in New York City and you face off with all those minions and everything along the way. They originally used it as a way to showcase sort of all the different clans that were there, and some of the other game. There's several. I've got all these books that make some which are sort of the mainstay games that which are werewolves and fairies were the sort of the two big ones. There's also mages and wraiths and mummies and a whole host of other stuff. There's like 18 or 19 different hardback books out there that all little sets for different types of creatures you can be. The vampire was clearly the biggest one. So they're trying to showcase most of this stuff as you're going through. And they touch upon other games, like you run into a werewolf or two. I don't think you ever see a fae, or if you do, you don't know it is, which is more accurate to know. So because of Activision, this is a sort of departure from your question, but also not. Like, we have a second project called Chronicles that is going to happen after we do Prague. The entire original game was Prague, Vienna, London, New York, and so we're building Prague right now for Reawakened, and then because we don't know if Activision is going to give us a cease and desist, we have insured ourselves in a way so that after doing all this work, we're going to build Chronicles, which is a more customizable set where you can choose your gender, choose your clan within a limited set of clans that we provide, and then go through quests in Prague, which are going to be in 1199. This one takes place in 1194. So Chronicles will be at 1199, and we'll follow some important events canonical to the world that you become a part of in that way. And then we'll hold our breath and see if Activision doesn't sue us. And if they don't, then if they don't, then we'll continue with both game sets. But if they do, then we'll just drop Reawaken and keep building Chronicles, and then do Chronicles for Vienna, London, New York, and then you might even meet the original character from the Reawakened game, because he belongs to Paradox, so we can use him all we want. And anyway, so we have two games essentially that we're releasing. And the second one should come much more quickly than the first, because we've ironed out all the mechanics at this point. So it's now just building maps and building story, which can happen pretty quickly.
Awesome,
we're running out of time, but yeah, that is in short the summary. And the story around the second one, I'm gonna hold back because around the canonical stuff, because we're doing some stuff that White Wolf has not been willing to put out there in video games before, because it's dirty and ugly, and it's
the underside of humanity.
it's more horrific than the horror that vampires experience. And so I think they touched on it in the Bloodlines, but anyway, spoiler stuff that I don't want to give out. So.
Okay. Well, it sounds exciting, and best of luck to you guys on this project. And you guys are all putting in so much time and energy and effort and creativity, and I hope that it all fruits for you all in a way that is exciting and makes you feel like you did a thing successfully. So
yeah, we're all hoping that, and we appreciate the sentiment.
Yeah, man.
There's am I allowed to plug something?
Yeah, go ahead.
there's and it's gonna not matter after tomorrow, but there's an expo that's a giant modding expo in Poland, and I guess across Europe. People know about it, called CD Action. And it's tomorrow, which is the 29th of 2026. And we've been invited to that. And so that is what we've been gearing for. So the timing of this podcast is actually very fortuitous, but sweet. That's been my week so far, is just like hammering down, little things here and there that mostly that I've been annoyed about, that the devs are now like, wait, this is still out there. I'm like, yep, y'all never did it. So they're everyone that is able to give time this week, we've asked to try to help out. And so hopefully that'll give us a nice shot of market awareness. Anyway,
Yeah, man. Awesome. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, and we are getting close to time here. But before we wrap, is there anyone or anything in your career that you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe a mentor, valuable resource, or a favorite client?
Gosh, my late friend Chip Rose, who when I was LARPing, like he kind of showed me, and a lot of people, I think, that there was gaming used to have the people used to look at it a little differently. It was almost like a stigma in some cases, and you weren't taken seriously if you're a gamer. And now, that was 20 years ago, but I think that's changed. Like I watched him build a family and hold a career, and also run a giant LARP, that I helped him run. And I did not have a family at the time. I had a career. Kind of emboldened me to just keep going forward, and to pursue this passion. And then Valero, who's the lead of the Vampire Project, wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, weren't for him. And got to meet him in Prague last year, actually, when I traveled to Europe, so that was kind of fun. But
Oh yeah.
because he's in Poland, so it's like a 4-hour train ride for him. Yeah, but anyway, he's put up with my bullshit and all of my crazy ideas, and sometimes we can't do all the things. For the most part, we've been able to do the things that I wanted to do. And that, like, if it weren't for him, this project wouldn't exist. And somebody would not be looking forward to it. So
I love that, and yeah, I love people just bringing things to fruition that they want to see in the world, and that is the core of creativity, I suppose, right? So
yeah.
all right, so we've been talking to Khedron DeLeon. You can check him out at khedrondeleon.com. That's AKHEDRONDELEON.com. If listeners want to follow up with you directly, is there a better place to go, or is that the best spot?
I mean, as far as just seeing my work, that's probably the best place. But I think contacting me, LinkedIn or Facebook.
Okay.
My name is spelled the same. There are not too many Khedrons out there, so it's which it should be pretty easy to find me. I've also written just other plug real quick. There's a Arthurian Space Epic. It's an analog of the Arthurian romances that takes place in deep space, that I published on Amazon Kindle, called To the Echo of Beating Wings. And the first book is King Tiger. Anyway, that's another place that you probably find me if you needed to.
Awesome.
And yeah.
All right, well, we'll link all that in the show notes. And thank you so much for being on the show, Khedron. And if this episode sparks something for you all, share it with your friends or colleagues. And until next time, friends, we'll see you. Take it easy.
Thank you very much.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.